What's up, everyone? This is Lan here with another episode of Cheeseheadz Weekly. It is July 25th, the day before the Packers start training camp here. They'll be starting tomorrow, July 26th. It's a Wednesday. And you can check out the dates on their official website, packers.com. The official dates, for media. Um, the days that are open for media, the practices, and different things, joint practices, and then preseason games. So you can look at that and see what when they're going to be practicing, and so you can keep up with everything. I will say this episode is being pre-recorded, so I have no idea what news is happening at this point in time for you all, because I am recording this about a week, or a little more than a week and a half before this is actually happening. So yes, it is July 25th for you guys, a Tuesday, or after, whenever, depending on when you're listening. But for me, it is not. So we're going on vacation here for almost 2 weeks, and so I have to pre-record some episodes to make sure you guys still have content every Tuesday. So here we are, and we're gonna do a training camp preview since it's the day before training camp. We do have the Q&A and polls on Spotify. You can check those out. Those are a lot of fun, so participate in those. We also have a link in the description to send in a voice message. You can send in a question, disagreement, agreement with anything I say here, and maybe even topics you want to see in the show in the future. The show is available on Spotify, Google Podcasts, iHeartRadio, Stitcher, and Pandora. New episodes are out every single Tuesday, except lately it seems like we've had a few on Wednesday, but it's supposed to be Tuesday. Normally, it is Tuesday. Hit the bell on Spotify to be notified when a new episode comes out, and maybe you can there's a bell on some of the other platforms as well. I haven't looked at those that closely because I normally use Spotify. Tell your friends about the show. That's very important. Also, you can rate the show. That's always helpful as well. Thank you for those of you that have done that. I know of some people who have, and it's good to see all that. So let's dive right into our training camp preview here. So I'm gonna go over each position group here, tell you who I think are kind of go an overview of each position group, what I think we're gonna do, and if you check out my website, hopefully, I will have um, a before training camp 53-man roster prediction. I'll modify my prediction from before and stick that out there because a few things have changed in my mind for that. And so you can see a 53-man roster prediction there. I'm not going to actually go over that totally here. I mean, you probably could get an idea, but it's better just to have a visual of that anyway. So you can check out the website over at Cheeseheadz Weekly. Greatcove.net/cheeseheadz, and uh, just you can check it out there. Different blog posts, and hope I'll have that one out as well. So we'll start with offense, and so we'll go quarterback, obviously, first. The only lock here is Jordan Love, as we all know. The players on the bubble would be Sean Clifford and Danny Etling to this point. It's possible they sign a veteran. Um, it's I would say it's a 50-50 chance they do that at this point. I certainly don't consider it likely, but I wouldn't say it's unlikely either. It's possible they do. I'd say I'd maybe lean slightly toward them not signing a veteran quarterback, but we don't really know that at this point. And it's quite possible here before training camp that they'll sign someone. And obviously, someone could be signed that I have no idea who it is because I'm talking, before a good bit before training camp when um, those of you hearing this, training camp has basically started. So, I guess you guys will know that before I tell you it. Um, so, as far as who's going to make the roster, I expect probably Sean Clifford. And I'd say Sean Clifford makes the roster even if they do sign a veteran. Either way, I think he does just because he's a draft pick. I think they're very high on him. He's been taking second team reps in the offseason program. So I expect him to definitely be on the 53-man roster. So it's possible I maybe should have put him as a lock. But I mean, there's always that outside chance he's not on the roster. My guess is he is. The only way he would not be is if they sign a veteran and don't have room for a third quarterback. But I'd say if they don't sign a veteran, it'll be Jordan Love and Sean Clifford, Danny Etling, maybe on the practice squad. As far as players to watch during camp, as far as out of the locks category, obviously Jordan Love. All eyes are on Jordan Love. We all want to see how he progresses, through training camp, preseason, and then the start of the regular season. So, definitely, you're going to want to keep your eyes on Jordan Love. And the player on the bubble to watch is pretty obviously Sean Clifford. He has shown a little bit, flashed a little bit, which is good to see. Um, Definitely a good teammate. Jordan Love also. Um, Teammates have spoken very highly of him, of his leadership abilities. He seems to be a very good leader. So yeah, Sean Clifford, keep your eyes on him because if the Packers have to call on someone other than Jordan, if Jordan goes down or something, it's gonna be Sean Clifford likely, and so we're wanting to see if he can handle being a starter in a pinch if need be. On to running back. The locks are obviously Aaron Jones, A.J. Dillon. Players on the bubble, Tyler Goodson, Patrick Taylor, Lou Nichols III, Emmanuel Wilson, and Henry Pearson, who is a fullback. At this point, Emmanuel Wilson and Henry Pearson look like practice squad candidates. It is highly unlikely they will not be making the roster. Pretty much the third. It's between Goodson, Taylor, and Nichols as to who will win the number 3 running back spot. So far through OTAs, it's looked like Tyler Goodson. He's really been flashing every single year. Last year he was flashing. This year he is. Um, People have been talking about him. Just looks really explosive, plays really hard in practice, and definitely is working hard to try to earn himself a roster spot as a priority undrafted free agent from what was it last year. Yeah, definitely he's a very good player. I'd say for an undrafted free agent, so it should be fun watching this battle play out. Patrick Taylor has the experience of being in that role before. And the reason being, Ben Sirmans, running back coach, has said this before. It comes down to a lot of other things. Third running back is not going to actually be rushing much. So we're looking for a guy that can pass block, that can play special teams. So far, Goodson has not. He's taken some reps with the kick returners. He's not going to be the kick returner though. If Nixon's out there, he might be down. He's pretty far down the list for kick returner. So that's not likely to be his role. He's got to find a role in special teams, likely, if he wants to win this spot. So we'll have to keep our eye on him. Nichols, his advantage is pretty much that he's a draft pick. He's not. He's been kind of quiet through camp, dropped a pass or two. So, but he is a draft pick, and Goody likes to keep his draft picks on the roster. So it should be interesting to see how this plays out. As far as players to watch during camp, I would say the player on lock to watch would be A.J. Dillon. This guy hasn't really totally broken out. He's flashed a lot. He looks like a very serviceable back, a great number two back, or maybe I should say pretty good number two back. I mean, for most teams, he would be a good number two back for sure. But he needs to learn to keep his balance on the second level a little bit. Sometimes he just looks like he's kind of lumbering around, and I'd like to see him get a little bit more explosive and just be able to shoot through gaps and not just have to bruise his way down the field 3 yards at a time. Um, so A.J. Dillon is definitely the guy to watch as he enters a contract year. Definitely would love to see him get better, and hopefully he can earn himself a second contract with Packers or someone else. But he seems to be a great teammate. Not much of an ego there, which I really like. Is content to be the number two back behind Jones, and him and Jones are very good friends. So I really like him as a Packer. Just like to see him get a little bit better in some areas. Maybe as a pass catcher, he could improve a little bit as well. So that's my player to watch there. Player on the bubble to watch is definitely Tyler Goodson. He's always the guy that's fun to watch in camp, that people are talking about, or at least he has been the last 2 years, or last year, and probably this year. This year so far through OTAs and everything. So it should be fascinating to see if he can secure that job over guys like Nichols and Taylor, who have experience and high, or sorry, not high, but the draft capital, the draft pick there in Nichols, definitely is what is working against him. So it should be interesting to see what Goodson can do and to see if he can earn that role on special teams. Moving on to wide receiver, our locks are Christian Watson, Romeo Doubs, Jaden Reed, and Samori Toure. Some would say Samori Toure is not exactly a lock. He pretty much is. He's gotten reps with the ones. Him and Jaden Reed have kind of alternated as far as the number three receiver on the field. He could see some time in the slot this year, and he's been brought up unprompted. I don't know how many times by different Packers coaches. It sounds like he's put on some weight, and he just looks really good. And that's great to hear. He flashed a little bit, did catch a touchdown pass, a really nice one, from Rodgers against the Bills. Um, very fun player, and I'm really excited to see what he can do. Um, Players on the bubble is Dontavian Wicks, Grant Dubose, Malik Heath, Bo Melton, Jeff Cotton, Deuce Watts, and Jadakiss Bonds. The guys who will not make the roster, Jeff Cotton, Deuce Watts, and Jadakiss Bonds. Um, Pretty much, Dontavian Wicks is pretty close to a lock, but I couldn't quite put him on the locks because he didn't get a ton of time during OTAs. He was injured some of the time. Um, Not always on the practice field, but I have high hopes for him. I'm sure the Packers do as well. I expect him to be on the roster. The guys who I would consider really on the bubble and that are kind of battling for that sixth spot, likely only the sixth spot, although it's possible they keep seven. Grant DuBose, Malik Heath, and Bo Melton. Um, so Grant DuBose is playing catch up. Likely, I expected him to make the roster as that sixth receiver, just because he's a draft pick and everything. I liked him coming out of college, but I don't. It's He didn't practice at all during OTAs. He's injured. He's playing catch up. Matt LaFleur said so. Said as much that he will be playing catch up. Um, and also guys like Malik Heath have flashed. Malik Heath has made a play about every single day. That was open to the media. Every single practice open to the media. He made a big play, big catch, whatever. He's not been like really consistently targeted. He did see a little bit of time with the ones at one point as well, and yeah, I think Malik Keith is definitely a guy to keep an eye on. He is my guy, my player to watch on the bubble. Is Malik Heath. Could he sneak in on the roster ahead of Grant Dubose, the draft pick? Um, that's pretty much what it is at this point. And Bo Melton is the other guy I mentioned. I'd say it's a little bit of a long shot for him to get on, unless they keep a seventh receiver. I wouldn't mind having him on. I think he has great speed, could be a great gadget guy, but other than that, he hasn't made a whole lot of noise in OTAs. It should be interesting to see what he does in camp, but the guy to watch is definitely Malik Heath out of that group, and the player on lock to watch is Jaden Reed. I thought about putting Samori Toure. I mean, to be honest, all these guys I'm really excited to watch just to see them build rapport with Jordan Love. Um, Samori Toure, I thought about putting him on there, but Jaden Reed is kind of an unknown at this point. I mean, we saw what he did in college. I'm very high on him. I think the Packers are as well. Um, but it'd be interesting to see what he can do. Not a lot of noise at all. We did not hear Jaden Reed, anything about Jaden Reed, really, from OTA stuff. Very quiet. And so I would like to see him make some noise here during training camp and the preseason. And I'm excited to see him during preseason once the pads come on and everything. Watch him play. Let's move on to tight end. The locks are Luke Musgrave, Tucker Kraft, Josiah DeGuara. Players on the bubble are Tyler Davis, Austin Allen, and Cameron McDonald. So Austin Allen and Cameron McDonald are undrafted free agents. Maybe it's possible that Austin Allen was from a year ago. I don't really remember. I do know they're both undrafted. Um, so yeah, the locks, Tucker Kraft, Luke Musgrave, Tucker Kraft, and Josiah DeGuara. Out of those three players, I'm very excited to watch Luke Musgrave. He made a ton of noise just with his size, smooth movement skills, just looked amazing, looked the part for sure during OTAs. It is going to be so much fun to see what he can do once the pads come on, and I'm very excited to see what he can do, and hopefully he can make an impact pretty early on as a big target over the middle of the field for Jordan Love in this Packers offense. Um, but also very excited to see what Tucker Kraft can bring to the table as well. As far as the players on the bubble, probably the guy to watch would be Tyler Davis, and it's likely he is a lock. Packers have spoken highly of him in the past. He has consistently improved as an undrafted free agent from 2 or 3 years ago. And so likely he's going to be on the roster with those other three, and that would probably be it at tight end. Um, so I don't really expect Allen or McDonald to leapfrog him in the pecking order, but you never know. So that's my guy to watch there. And it would be good just to see him improve some once the pads come on and during training camp to see some continued improvement there. And he's a core special teamer for them, so I expect him to make the roster. As far as offensive line, our locks are David Bakhtiari, Elton Jenkins, Josh Myers, John Runyon Jr., Zach Tom, and Yash Nyman. The players on the bubble would be Caleb Jones, Sean Ryan, Jake Hansen, Royce Newman, Luke Tenuta, Rasheed Walker, Chuck Filiaga, DJ Scaife, Kadeem Telfort, Gene DeLance, and I apologize if I butchered some names there. Those guys are unlikely to make the roster, probably those last four there. But it should be interesting. They're very deep at offensive line. And the main battle here is at right tackle between Zach Tom and Yash Nyman. I expect both of those to make the roster. I have both of them as locks. And I think, in all likelihood, I'd say Zach Tom wins the job. This guy's versatile. He has shown so much stepping in last year to play at left tackle, I believe, for Bakhtiari. He showed a lot there. It looks really awesome, and I can't wait to see what he can do. And Josh Nyman is going to be a really awesome swing tackle for them. Um, and Caleb Jones. My player on lock to watch, by the way, is Zach Tom. For some of the reasons I mentioned, I can't wait to see what he can do, and just a very fun player for the offensive line, being able to move around a lot. Um, play, and as far as the right tackle battle, Josh Nyman and Zach Tom pretty much split reps during OTAs there with the ones. So it's hard to tell exactly who's going to win. I do think it is going to be Zach Tom, the fourth round draft pick from last year. The player on bubble to watch, though, is Caleb Jones. This guy is an absolute monster. He stands at like 6'7", 370 pounds maybe. He's go look it up yourself. I'm not reading off the exact measurements, but from what I remember, that's about what it was. But don't take my word for it for sure. Uh, I am really excited to see what this guy can do. He's taken some time with the ones when Bakhtiari wasn't out there, and he was the guy, the backup at left tackle. I'm very excited to see what he can do. I for sure expect him to make the roster, but nothing is set in stone yet. Um, but I think he's gonna make the roster, and very excited to see what he can do at training camp. Um, if I had to guess. Packers will probably keep, I don't know, 10 or 11 linemen. I believe they kept 10 last year. Um, so it's pretty much, wow. Caleb Jones, Sean Ryan, Jake Hansen, Royce Newman, Luke Tenuta, and Rasheed Walker. There's probably going to be like two of those, um, one or two of those that does not make the roster. Should be interesting who it is. I don't think Jake Hansen should make the roster. Um, but it's possible he does just because he is the only real backup center we have here. But some of these guys can play center, like Zach Tom. Um, and I would almost feel better with Zach Tom at center than Jake Hansen, even though Zach Tom does not play a ton of center. Um, and that's not his main position. But we'll see what happens. Sean Ryan, I expect to make the roster just because he was a third round pick, and they're not going to give up on him quite yet. I would like to see him do something through camp and preseason as well, but we'll see what happens there. So it should be fun to see what happens between Newman, Tenuta, and Walker, and I guess Hanson. Um, let's go to the defense now. Um, As far as the defensive line, it's a lot easier to predict than the offensive line. Our locks are Kenny Clark, TJ Slayton, Devontae Wyatt, Colby Wooden, and Carl Brooks, and I would say that's probably about it for the final roster. Or, sorry, maybe I should say the initial roster, 53-man roster. Um, the players on the bubble are Jonathan Ford, Chris Slayton, Antonio Moultrie, and Jason Lewin. Um, so if anyone makes it, probably Jonathan Ford. Although Chris Slayton has made some noise in past, like last year, last summer. Jonathan Ford looks a little bit slimmer from what I've heard during training camp. Like he's putting in some work, but that's about as far as it's gone. I haven't heard him making actually some really awesome plays or anything. My player on lock to watch is Kobe Wooden. He's got a lot of tools, a lot of things he can do, but it's just can he put it together? Can he actually um, reach that potential? That's what I'm looking for him. And my player on the bubble to watch is Jonathan Ford. And by the way, Carl Brooks would, by some, not be considered to make the roster. I think he will. Kobe Wooden has spent some time with the ones. Brooks has not, but I think he will still make the roster. Um, but Jonathan Ford, I'd like to see what he can do. Maybe he'll make some noise once the pads come on. Um, since we've heard a little bit about him already. Edge rusher, the locks are Rashawn Gary, Preston Smith, Lucas Van Ness, Kingsley Enagbari, and Justin Hollins. Now, Rashawn Gary, he's in the lock section just because if he would happen to be healthy enough to make the roster, he absolutely would. But we don't know the status of his injury and everything. It's possible he's placed on the pup list to start the season. We'll see. So he's definitely a player to watch during camp. But my main player, the players on the bubble are Brenton Cox Jr., Jonathan Garvin, Ladarius Hamilton, Keyshawn Banks, and Kenneth Odemegwu. The player on lock to watch is Lucas Van Ness. He made plenty of noise during OTAs. Excited to see what he can do. Definitely looked the part and was putting pressure all over. Looked like a pretty experienced edge rusher. There's this play everyone's talking about where he set the edge against the run to identify it wasn't the run. Didn't just go streaking after the quarterback. Identified that it was just play action. There was not a handoff, and so set the edge first, and then got off the block and put pressure on the quarterback immediately. Very awesome play. Pads aren't on yet, so the levels of excitement should be low still at this point, but I mean, it's hard to keep them that way. I understand that, and it's going to be really fun to see what he can do during training camp and preseason, and especially if Rashawn Gary misses a few games at the beginning of the season, he could find himself playing a good bit. Justin Hollins, some people would say, just because of his contract and everything, that he's not really tied to the Packers. They could very easily cut him. But he has been seeing time with the ones consistently alongside Preston Smith. Um, and so I fully expect him to be on the team here, and he was a very valuable addition towards the end of last year. Um, so the player on bubble to watch would be Brenton Cox Jr. He's already been called out by Coach LaFleur. I'm excited to see what he can do and see if he can make the roster. It's possible, especially if Rashawn Gary is good to go, that it's only those top five that are locks on the roster. But I think if anyone gets in, it's between Cox, Garvin, and Hamilton, and I would think Cox is in the lead for that spot if there is one. So I'm very excited to see him hopefully progress and especially to not make any mistakes, off-field mistakes. He has a lot of talent, but would have been drafted otherwise if not for some off-field issues. So I'm excited and hopeful for his future. At inside linebacker, the locks are Devondre Campbell, Quay Walker, Isaiah McDuffie, and that's it. Players on bubble, Eric Wilson, Tariq Carpenter, and Jimmy Phillips Jr. The player on lock to watch is Quay Walker. Love to see him progress. It's going to be very fun to see what he can do. Um, yeah, looking forward to training camp for Quay Walker, and obviously, hopefully, he can clean up that off-field stuff. The two ejections towards the end of last year. I'd love to see him clean that up and just be a really dominant player for them. At the linebacker spot, just to put another guy in there, Devondre Campbell, I'd like to see him step up and have a season a little bit closer to the All-Pro season. Not as much, just play a little bit better than he did last year. And last year he was injured at one point as well, so be good to see him bounce back. Player on bubble to watch would be Tariq Carpenter, making the position switch from safety. Um, it's gonna be an uphill battle for him to make the roster. He was a core special teamer last year, but so is Eric Wilson, and I'm not totally sure they would keep five inside linebackers. So it should be interesting to see what happens. It's gonna be a pretty nice battle between Eric Wilson and Tariq Carpenter there. Jimmy Phillips would be a long shot to make the roster. Um, as far as cornerback, the locks are Jair Alexander, Rasul Douglas, Eric Stokes, Keyshawn Nixon. Obviously, we don't know about Eric Stokes. I'd say he's probably more likely than Rashawn Gary to start the season on PUP with a pretty serious foot injury. Liz Frank had surgery in his ankle and knee, so should be interesting. Just see what happens with him. He's definitely a guy to watch, but the main guy I'm looking forward to watching is Keyshawn Nixon. He brings a bunch of energy um, to this to the defense as a whole, and I look to him to keep that up. And he's likely the starter, at least to start the season at the slot corner position. Very excited to see what he can do there, and so keep your eye on Keyshawn Nixon. I expect him to make lots of plays, and every time he's been called on, he has delivered. And obviously, we know that he can do it as a returner too. And if he can do some defense, be a solid player there, and also be a great returner, he's going to get a big contract next year, be it with the Packers or some other team. I would sure hope it is with the Packers. The players on the bubble are Carrington Valentine, Corey Ballantyne, Keandre Thomas, Shamar John Charles, William Hooper, Ford Tyrell. Should be interesting which one of these people, these guys here make it. It depends sort of on Eric Stokes' status and also just how many they keep. I don't remember how many they kept last year, but it was probably 5 or 6. So it should be interesting for sure. I would say Carrington Valentine is definitely my player to watch. Made 2 plays back to back on again in coverage versus Romeo Dobbs, who has been making plays against Jair Alexander during camp. Or sorry, not camp, OTAs. So great to see that. I'd like to see him continue to show up during camp preseason, and I'd love to see him earn a roster spot. I expect him to be on the roster, um, but it should be interesting to see. It's possible he even gets some playing time next year too as a 7th round pick. So we definitely want to see him play well throughout the summer. As far as safety goes, the locks are Darnell Savage Jr., Rudy Ford, Tarvarius Moore, and Jonathan Owens. Some people would say only Savage and Ford are locks, which could be true. It's pretty wide open, but we've seen both Tarvarius Moore and Jonathan Owens get some reps with the ones. So I expect those two both to be on the roster. On the bubble is Anthony Johnson Jr., Dallin Levitt, Ennis Gaines, and Benny Sapp III. This is a fun group. I think all of these guys hold some upside, except for Levitt, who is a special teamer only. Please keep him that way. Keep him as that. Um, he really doesn't even need the safety label on him, to be honest. So it should be interesting how many they keep. I think in the past they've kept maybe 5. And so is it Anthony Johnson Jr., is it Dallin Levitt, or is it Ennis Gaines? I think Benny Sapp is probably practice squad candidate. Ennis Gaines has played some in the slot. He's flashed. He's played quality snaps. I think he very well could make the roster. Could be a valuable guy there at safety or slot corner for them. But what about Dallin Levitt, the special teamer? We know how much they are invested in the special teams. But then Anthony Johnson Jr. is a draft pick that I think everyone's very high on. I certainly am, and he's my player on the bubble to watch. Didn't show up a ton in OTAs, made a play or two. I'm hoping he can continue that and just magnify it a little bit, make even more plays during training camp and preseason. Player on lock to watch is Tarvarius Moore. He was flashing a little bit there in his time with the ones. He got a little bit more time with the ones than Owens and was flashing. Has a little bit of experience as a starter, as does Owens. So it should be interesting what he can do and see maybe as the season goes on, maybe he ends up being a starter if Ford doesn't start very strong. And same with Owens. So that will do it. I guess I did not address special teams. There could be some battle there. At punter is Pat O'Donnell and Daniel Whelan. Daniel Whelan has shown some power. I'm pretty sure it's going to be Pat O'Donnell because he has the experience and also especially the experience to punt in the cold. But Whelan is certainly a guy to keep your eye on, maybe a practice squad candidate. As far as kicker, this is Anders Carlson's job to lose at this point. There's no one else on the roster, and he has flashed a little bit during OTAs. Flashed a big leg and made connected on a lot of kicks. But obviously, this isn't real game simulation, so we'll see what he can do. And it's also not quite as cold as it will be, down the stretch, November, December, in Green Bay. So it should be interesting to see what he can do. Could be some ups and downs in his first year, but likely he's the starting kicker. And then a long snapper, we have Matt Orzik and Broughton Hatcher. It's likely Matt Orzik as he is the seasoned veteran, but you never know. It's kind of up in the air. You never know what Hatcher will do. So I guess we'll see what happens. So that is all for this episode. You can check out the Q&As and the polls in the description. Send in a voice message. And check out the website and that 53-man roster prediction that I will have put out then. Thanks for listening. And I will talk to you guys later. Goodbye.